This video is going to be about walk cycles and how to use CelAction to create walk cycles from keying them out all the way through to in-betweening them and making the final adjustments to get everything looking just so. We've got my character here set up in the camera, and the first thing we want to do is set a 3/4 pose to use as the starting point to set our first stepping pose. So I'm going to use the actions for that, so I'm going to press A, and then I'm going to press turn around and choose this 3/4 heading to the right action. So once I've got that, I'm just going to set up a line guide. So I'm going to go level, create guide, and then I'm going to choose from here line, and I'm going to choose settings, and I'm going to change the color to black so that it's easy to see. I'm going to press OK, and there's my line guide. For this one, I'm going to create 2 line guides. So level, create guide again, and select line. For this one, I'm going to choose a different color. So I'm going to go for red. So there's my 2 line guides. And I'm just going to move these down to match the first one with his heel. And the second one, I'm just going to put very slightly higher. So that's our line guides set up. So now that I've got my 2 line guides and I've got my action pose here, first thing to do is to set the contact poses for my walk cycle, and that's where you need to start from with any walk cycle. So the contact poses are where the character's legs are at their furthest apart. So when his rear leg is on its toe and his forward leg is on its heel and it's about to transfer weight. So I'm just going to set those poses up now. So the first thing to do, for all of the X movement here, we're going to use the pants level for the time being. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the shortcuts Control, Shift and the arrows just to move him back a little bit here. And then I'm going to start setting my first pose. So the first pose in my walk cycle, I'm going to spread this leg out and I'm going to move this one back. And I'm using these lines as the guide for where his foot should roughly be in terms of its contact with the ground. So I'm going to use the foot shapes here. I'm going to choose the profile feet for both feet. And then I'm going to set the arms up so that they are opposing the leg on which side they are. And these contact poses, they are more mechanical than they are kind of artistic. You need to just get the mechanics of the walk cycle down first before you start kind of applying character and flair to it. So I'm just going to put a little bend in his head. I'm going to lean his body forward a little bit. So an important thing to try and do is to try and get the midpoint between his feet at the center point of his body. So that should be good for my first pose of the walk cycle. Now the next thing I'm going to do is, using this pose, I'm going to establish the distance that my walk cycle is going to travel, which is a really important thing to establish when you first do a walk cycle. So to do that, I'm going to use the pants level to drag him across the screen. The cycle that I want to do is going to be 25 frames long. So I'm going to just, with Control and 1, I'm going to color frame 25 here on my dope sheet, because that's going to be the point where we return to this first pose. So therefore, the middle pose here is on frame 13. So that's the first pose that I want to create. So basically, we're going to have, this is the first step. And on 13, this pose will be the same but reversed, so this leg will be stepping forwards. And then when we come to 25, we'll have exactly this pose again, but it will have moved further forwards, and that will be our cycle. So on frame 13, I'm going to use the pants level, and I'm going to use Control and the arrow keys to move him across. And so this is establishing the distance of our walk cycle. And as you can see, I'm using onion skins here, which are essential for walk cycles. And the onion skins that I'm using, and I would recommend this for setting up the walk cycles, is adjacent changed poses. And I have these set up with 1 onion skin before the pose that I can see and 1 onion skin after the pose. So I'm just moving him forwards, and you can see that what I'm doing, I've matched this leg with this leg now. So all I've done is a pants movement, moving him forwards on that dummy to establish the distance that he's going to travel when he takes a step. So now I'm going to click on my final frame, frame 25, and I'm going to do the same thing again. So I'm going to use Control and the arrow keys, and there's the onion skin of the last pose, and I'm moving him across again until his heels have matched up. So that has established the distance that he's going to travel. So if I was to play that, all you'll see is the same pose being dragged across the screen using the pants element, so it'll just be sliding across the screen. So let's have a look at that. So that's all we've got so far. Extremely simple. So the reason we're planning the walk like this and setting our step distance and our left to right X movement, if you like, across the screen. So we're planning this movement first, and that's going to be the basis of the rest of our walk. The reason we're doing this and progressing him across the screen is because it's very important that as they move across the screen, just in terms of the X movement, that the movement is completely even. If I draw a line here at his back, and I draw another line at his back when he's here, and another line at his back when he's here, these spaces here, they need to be completely even, so that when he's walking, it's not accelerating or decelerating. They're completely even as he goes across the screen. What we don't want is accelerations and decelerations, so you have two frames close together, one a little bit further, some more close together, one a little bit further. And the reason that that is not ideal is that if we have a camera panning with our character, and we have these little accelerations and decelerations, the character, you might start him in the center of the screen, but on a deceleration, he'll lose ground and drop backwards in terms of the screen. And on an acceleration, he will gain ground on the camera and actually move forward on the screen. So it's very important to set this spacing for the distance he steps each time before you move on to doing anything else with the walk. And using the initial pose here is a very good way to do that, because the distance has been established that he steps. And a common thing that you see is people will plan a walk like it was on a conveyor belt, so they won't actually make any movements forward and they'll slide the feet backwards as they go. And the problem with doing that is that if you've estimated the feet sliding backwards each frame, it's very hard to exactly slide the foot back to match how much he needs to move forward for that foot movement. So you can end up with these uneven walk cycles if you start with a conveyor belt style way of doing it. We don't want even movement in animation entirely, so you get your accelerations and decelerations and interest from the up and down movement as he bobs up and down, but the actual forward X movement should be completely even. So what we're going to want to do now is return to this middle pose. So we've established the distance that he's going to travel, but what we need to do now is establish the fact that this pose needs to in between these two, and therefore his arms and legs need to be reversing so that it actually works when we come to in between it. So I've clicked on my pose 13, and make sure you are in this mode, edit held poses. And what I'm going to do now is reverse his legs. So I'm going to cross them over. So I'm moving that one back and I'm moving this one forwards so that we can create this step that we're then going to use as the basis for the rest of our walk cycle. So what you need to make sure of is that his heel is contacting where his foot is going to be here, and that here the toes match up so that we've got a step that's actually going to work. And you can stretch his legs a little bit using the limbers to make them match up. But the crucial thing is that they do need to match up. So something like that for the legs. So now you can see his legs are crossing over. And then we just need to do the same with his arms. So this arm we're going to move back, and then the arm at the rear of his body. So here I'm moving up through the hierarchy using Shift and backslash. And that just moves you up the hierarchy one element at a time. So I can click on the piece of his arm at the back here that I can see, and then I can press Shift and backslash. That's up to the elbow. That's up to another part of the elbow. And then we're back up to the controller that we need of the upper arm. So now I can drag that out and make the pose for his arms crossing over as well. So now we have the first step, the second step, and the third step, which returns to the first pose. So now we've got something that's looking slightly more like a planned out walk cycle. So there we go. There's our three poses, and we'll have a look at that now. So that's what we've got so far. Very basic, but starting to look at least like a walk cycle rather than just an image sliding across a screen. So now I need to create some in-between poses for these steps. And these poses are called passing positions. So a passing position is when his legs are passing each other in order to create the next step. So what I'm going to do to start getting this is I'm going to click on my first frame, I'm going to shift and click on frame 13, so my second stepping pose, and I'm going to press Shift F6. So what that gives me is a breakdown, which is a single pose, right in the middle of frame 1 and frame 13. So it keeps this X movement across the screen perfectly even, and it gives me a starting point to create my passing position. So the first thing I'm going to do with my passing position is I'm going to move it up a little bit, just to start having some up and down movement in the walk cycle. For that, I'm going to use Control Shift and the up arrows just to create some tiny little movements. So 8 clicks of my up arrow. So I'm going to remember that for when I get to the passing position here, which will also need to have 8 clicks of my up arrow so that it matches. So I've got that, and now I'm going to actually pose the feet and legs to match the stepping. So I'm just going to bend this leg as he's stepping through. And then I'm going to slightly lower this leg so that it's on the red line guide that I've created. And again, I'm using Control, Shift and the arrow keys. And I've set very small increments for that. In Edit Preferences, you can set the increments for your movement here. So for this, I've set very small increments. So now you can see he's actually taking a step. So now all I've got to do is adjust my arms a little bit. So I'm going to try and create a bit of drag here. So I'm moving this hand forward and moving this bit of the arm forward as well. So there you go. There's my passing position. You'll see that there's actually a display order problem with this arm here. So I've clicked on the hand and I'm going to press Shift and backslash to move up the hierarchy. So now I am on the arm B upper control. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to press the top of the column here to select the whole column. I'm going to press Shift D to create a display order. And then I've selected move the family of the selected element. And I'm going to go over here to set display order. And I'm going to press this button to send that arm completely to the back of his display orders. I'm going to press OK. So that's now sent his back arm for our entire animation to the back. So now we've got that passing position, let's do our second passing position. So again, I'm going to click on frame 13. I'm going to shift and click on frame 25 this time. And again, I'm going to press Shift F6. And I moved the last one up by 8 clicks. So I'm going to do that again with my Control Shift and up arrow. So that's set the same amount of up movement as I had on frame 7. And then I'm going to again create my passing positions, except this time obviously it's the rear leg stepping through like this. And it's the leg that's on our side of his body that is contacting the ground for this pose. And I'm going to lower that here because it needs to be in contact with this black line, which I created for the foot nearer to us. And in fact, I should probably lower the leg a little bit in this one as well, so it's contacting that black line. So there's my second passing position, and I'm just going to make the same adjustments to the arm. So this time, this arm is coming forward, so I'm going to delay the hand this way, and this arm is going to be going this way. So there's my second passing position. So there's my first passing position, and here's my second passing position. So what we're going to do now is just have a look at that and see if that's looking closer to a walk. Okay, so there we go. Now it's starting to look a little bit more like a walk and with a little bob up and down as well. So we have contact, passing position, contact, passing position, contact, and that's also back to the beginning of the cycle, except obviously he's progressed across the screen. So now what we need to do is set our ups and our downs. So I tend to set the downs first, and by ups and downs I mean the point in the cycle where he's highest, so where his head is highest, and the point in the cycle where he's lowest, so where his head is lowest. So to create those, the first down is between frames 1 and 7, so the first down is between the first contact and the first passing position. So we're going to select between those two frames, so I've clicked on frame 7, I'm going to shift and click on frame 1. And I'm going to press Shift F6 again for my breakdown. So I press Shift F6 and it's given me this frame here. And the first thing I need to do is just move this down. So the reason I'm adding these ups and downs is because as he lands on this foot here, he transfers his weight to the ground, and that's going to bend his knee, and that's going to give him a sense of weight. If you make a walk cycle with no ups and downs, it will be entirely weightless and floaty. So to get this down, we're going to go onto the pants level again, and I'm going to use my small increments using Control Shift and the arrow keys to just move him down. And I'm using the top of his hat here as a reference point for how much I want to move him down. So there I've moved him down so that he's starting to transfer his weight. And now all I need to do is start moving his legs around so that they match up here. You don't need to be scared about moving the legs around a fair bit. They can always be hidden by the body, but the main thing is to try and get the feet roughly matched up here and to get a bit of bend in the knee. So now you can see his heel contacts and then his knee bends as he transfers his weight onto that leg. So there we have our down. So now what we want to do is create the next down in the pose, and that's obviously between the second contact and the second passing position. So I've selected frame 13 here, and I'm shift and clicking on frame 19, and I'm going to press Shift F6 again. I'm going to go to the pants level, and I'm going to move him down a little bit using his hat again as a reference point. And when I think that looks right, I'm going to bend his knee. Here I'm using the limber controller just to nudge his leg up a little bit to cheat it so that it's in the right place. And then on the foot that's stepping through again, I'm just going to lift it up a little bit so that it's not going toe through the floor. And maybe put in a little bit of delay on our arms again. So there we have our two down poses. So let's play that through and see how that looks. So it's getting a lot more character now, and it's getting a lot more bounce and weight to it. So at the moment what we've got is a contact, a down pose, a passing position, and then a contact, a down pose, a passing position, and then the contact that returns us to the beginning of the cycle. So you can see that there's this obvious gap here, and this gap is for the up positions. So we have contact, down, passing position, and then the ups are generally between the passing position and the next contact position. So I'm going to click on frame 13 and shift and click on frame 7, and again use my Shift F6 for a breakdown. And again I'm going to go to the pants level and use the pants level to create my up. So again I'm using his hat as a guide, and I'm moving him up using the arrow keys and control or control and shift to make sure that I've got a little bit of up motion. And then I need to have a look at his legs. So I'm going to use his limber controller here to make his foot go back towards the floor to keep that nice and firmly planted. So we can see that now he's lifting up and stepping through, which then gives us more impact when he does come to the contact position. So there we've got our up pose, and then we need to do the second up pose. So again, the up pose tends to be between the passing position and the contact position. So the last gap that we have here is between those two. So I'm going to click on frame 19, shift and click on frame 25, and I'm going to shift and F6. I'm going to go to the pants level and using control and shift and the arrow keys, move him up a little bit. And then I'm going to have a look at my legs there and make sure that those are all in the place that I want them to be. And then this foot that's stepping through, I'm just going to make that a little bit more extreme. And then I'm going to check my other up pose and check that it broadly matches. So now we have all our different poses for this cycle, and I'm going to color them now. We have all the contact poses I'm going to put as blue. So I'm going to use Control 1 to color all the contact poses. So there's a contact, and then we have a contact on frame 13 in the middle of the cycle. So those are all our contacts. And then we have our passing positions, which is what we did next. So I'm going to color those purple with Control and 4. So we had a passing position on 7, and we got another one on frame 19. Then we had our downs. So I'm going to use Control 5 to color the downs. There's our second down. And then we had our ups finally, and I'm going to use Control and 6 to color those. So those are the different frames that you need to create a walk cycle. And if we watch that through now, we should have the basic structure of a blocked out walk. So there we go, we've got the basic structure of our walk planned out. So now that I've coloured those and I've got all of my principal poses, there's a few things that I want to do before I actually in between this and then do the final animation tweaks. And the first thing I want to do to get the up and down, the Y movement, all very accurate, is I'm going to use the red column to make sure that each one of these colour pairings match. So in terms of the Y up and down movement, all of the contacts should be the same, and in terms of the Y movement, all of the downs should be the same, all of the passing positions should be the same as each other, and all of the ups should be the same as each other. So to check that the Y movement between those is even, I'm going to go into the red column here. So I'm going to click on the pants level, because that's where I put the Y movement, the up and down movement, and then I'm going to press on this red column. And then I'm not just going to press on this red column, because you can see that I can see X, Y here. So it's the movement of moving across and the movement moving up and down. I want to just look at the Y movement, so I'm going to click on this little Y here. And now what that's given me is the actual data for the Y movement for each of these poses. All of these blue ones ideally should match. So this says 994, 994, 994. And because I started with those, I would expect those to match. And then the passing positions also ought to match, so that's 1874, and that purple passing position also 1874, so those match. And then I just need to look at my red downs, so that's 984, and the second down is 984. And then I need to look at these orange ups, so that's 1154. And actually this second orange one, I've actually guessed wrong when I've been using my Control Shift and up arrows. And this is 1144. So all I need to do is actually move that up by one little click. And then I click off it and you can see that that says 1154. Now the reason that you want these colors to match each other is just so that the cycle for each step is even. If you had a character with a limp or a peg leg or something like that, then you wouldn't necessarily want these to match because you'd want an asymmetric walk cycle. But if you introduce asymmetry into a normal character's walk cycle, it does start looking like they have a limp. So that's why you need to be so careful when you're doing this, that these color pairings, the ups, the downs, the passing positions and the contacts, that the Y movement of all of those actually does match. So now that I've checked that, I can close my red column by clicking on the yellow columns up here and go back into this mode. So the next thing I want to do is just add a tiny bit of head movement to this. So if I go into the red column for the head, and I'm just going to press the plus here, which shows all of the data on the head, you can see that there's no data on the head at all, which means that although the head's being pulled up and down by inheriting movement from the body, the head itself is not doing very much. And I just want to introduce an incredibly subtle bit of rotation to that to help this walk cycle along. So I'm just going to start moving the head just to have a little bit of movement there. So as he moves down, I'm going to drag the head back a tiny bit. So I'm only using rotation on the head here, and it's only extremely subtle. And then as he stands, I want the head to start coming forward. And as he's at his highest point, the head's at its most forward point, and then he steps down into the contact, and I'm not going to change the contact. And then he is in his down position where I moved the head previously back a little bit. Then he's in the passing position. Then he's in his up position. And I'm going to move the head a little bit forward again. And then I'm not going to change this contact. So now we've got a tiny bit of head movement in there. We'll play that through, but probably at the moment in blocking stage, we won't actually be able to see that head movement. So the last thing I'm going to do before I in between this is I'm going to actually start favouring the arms a little bit so that when I in between it, they won't be too even. And by favouring it, what I mean is, here's my first pose, and my second pose, the arms are starting to move back. And so I'm going to make the arms on frame 4 closer to frame 1 than they are to frame 7, because at frame 7 they've started moving faster. So the main arm I'm looking at here is actually the rear arm, because that's moved quite a lot there. So I'm using shift and backslash to move up the hierarchy there, and I'm just going to move this arm closer to the pose that it's at on frame 1. So it's just moving a little bit less than it was before, and it's not now completely in the middle. Now I've got my passing position, that's fine. And then I've got my up. And so in my up, the arms should be starting to slow into the frame 13 pose. So on my up, I'm going to again favor the frame 13 pose and move these arms a little bit closer to where they are in the frame 13 pose. And then I've got my next down pose. So on this next down pose, I want to favor the frame 13 pose again because they're speeding up. But that one actually looks okay. And then on this up again, we want to favor the frame 25 pose. So on this up, I'm going to move the arm a little bit towards the frame 25 pose, and the same with the back arm there. Okay, so I've favored the movement of my arms a little bit. I've done my head movement, and I've checked the Y movement up and down of the pants. So now I've got my principal keys and I've made those final adjustments to them. What I want to do is interpolate between them. So the interpolate function basically finds every gap and it puts an in-between there, completely evenly. So there's not actually that many uses for interpolate for normal animation, but for a walk cycle where you've got these frames that are quite close together, and when you've got the frames right to dictate the basis of the movement, interpolate can be a great place to start from. I wouldn't expect to interpolate it and it just works perfectly straight away, but you can interpolate it and it gives you a good start in the animation process. So what I'm going to do is select frame 1 and drag to frame 25, and then I'm going to right click, I'm going to say interpolate default. So there's all my frames populated, and now I've got my walk on ones, 25 frames a second. When you're planning a walk, it's always best to do it on ones in case you do have a camera panning with it, or in case you have two characters walking together and then they're both on ones, you don't have them on alternative frames of twos, which can look a little bit stroby. It's much better to start out with a walk on ones, and if you want to get that twos look, you can delete every other frame for scenes where that works better. So let's have a look at this and let's try and identify the problems that are here before we go in and fix them. So there's our walk, so it's looking really nice actually. What are the problems that we can see? The first one, and that's the first thing to always check on a walk, is the feet. And you can see that the feet are kind of wobbling and jittering a little bit as he walks. I think that's the main thing that you always have to sort out with a walk. So I'm going to stop that playback there, and I'm going to use the mouse wheel to zoom in on the feet. And then I'm going to select those frames again, and I'm going to use the scene view playback here, which is going to play back this view that I've selected with my mouse wheel. So now that I've zoomed in on those feet, you can see that they're really jolting around a little bit, but that's nice and easy to fix. So back to my overall view of the walk. The head movement's looking quite nice. In general, the arms, where I've favoured certain poses to give them a nice acceleration and deceleration, that's working okay. And that's why it's important to do that in those key poses, because it's much more work going through frame by frame once you've populated all of these ones throughout your animation. But we might need to do a little bit of adjustment here and drag here. So we're going to have a look at the feet, we're going to have a look at the arms, and then the final thing would be to do a bit of follow through animation on things like the moustache, so the moustache would kind of bounce up and down merrily as he walks along. So those are the things that we've identified with our walk, and that's what we'll look at next. So firstly, let's look at the feet. So I'm going to use my mouse wheel here to zoom right in on the feet. So what you want to do with the feet, and the first thing I'm going to do actually is click on one of the feet. So the first foot that I'm going to fix is this one, and I'm just going to take a note of which one it actually is. It is just right at the bottom of the hierarchy there. It's foot B. So foot B is going to be the first one we're going to concentrate on. And what you want to do with the feet is, when the heel's contacting like this, you don't need to worry too much about the foot. It's when the foot needs to be flat on the floor, like this pose on frame 3, that's when you need to concentrate on it more. So here I've got frame 3 and the foot is closing in on the floor. And then frame 4 is completely flat on the floor. So frame 4 is the first frame that I want the foot to be completely locked to the floor. And from frame 4, I'm going to take that all the way to about frame 9. So from frame 4 to frame 9, I want to lock this foot. And so to do that, I can click from frame 9 to frame 4, or frame 4 to frame 9, but that range poses. I go into the red column for that foot. And then what I'm going to do is right click. I'm going to choose lock in place and first frame. So that's going to lock this foot in place from frame 4 all the way to frame 9. So it'll use the frame 4 position of this foot and it'll copy that all the way up to frame 9. So I'm going to press first frame. So you can see that that's changed the data on the foot there. So it's set down and now it's locked, nice and super solid. And then it'll come to frame 9 and then it will start to move again. So from frame 9, the foot starts to come up and you can see it actually slides back a little bit now. So I'm going to have to do some little bit of counter movement with my leg just to keep this foot nice and solid after having done that lock in place. So there we go, it's moving onto its toe there nicely. Now I'm going to look at foot A, so I'm going to click on this foot this time and let's have a look at that one. So here it's fine, so they're always fine when they're lifting up in the air, no one's looking at them carefully then. And then it's coming down into a heel contact here and then bang, there it is flat on the floor. So this is where I want to start locking it from frame 16 to about frame 20. So I'm shift and clicking from frame 20 back to frame 16, right click, lock in place, first frame. You see it's nice and solid there now, it won't be jittering around. And then it starts to move again on frame 21. And that's looking all good. It wasn't like the last one where it moved around all the time. One thing to make sure of with a walk cycle is this frame here, frame 25, and this frame here, frame 1. Those must be the same. So when you're making these adjustments, do not ever change frame 25 as a knock-on effect from any previous frames. It's really important. So let's have a look at that now and let's see how those feet look. So those feet are looking a lot more solid. So what I want to look at now is just the hands. I'm just going to add a little bit of drag to the hands. So I'm going to zoom in on my hands with my mouse wheel here, and I'm going to go to my rotate tool. Using my rotate tool, I'm going to move down through the frames using my arrow keys and just make little rotation adjustments as I go. So I'm moving from frame 1 to frame 2, and I'm just moving this hand so there's a little bit of drag on it as it comes through these poses. And then in the middle, it's got the most amount of bend to it. And then it starts to come round again. And then as it starts to move in the opposite direction, it obviously starts to drag back. And the basis of this is already in the keys that I set, but I'm just exaggerating it a little bit more. So this is what you would call a pass in animation. So it means that you're just focusing on one element at a time as you go through to make sure that each of those elements is working perfectly. And remember, don't change this frame here, frame 25. So that's that hand. Now I'm going to do the rearward hand, which is hand B. So it's there, and I'm going to go through with my arrow keys again, putting this little bit of drag on. So this is just straight ahead animation really, in the same way that you would do a bouncing ball or anything like that. And a straight ahead pass is always a really good way to get a nice bit of fluid movement into anything, which sometimes is hard to achieve with keyframe animation. So now his hand's starting to reverse again. So the way that it's dragging is also reversing. And now it's coming back in to its starting position. So let's have a look at those hands now. So they're looking nice and fluid. You can see that there's a little bit of a stick on this arm. So on the arm that's nearest to us, as it starts to move back, it sticks a tiny bit. So we're going to have a quick look at that. It's this arm. So I think what's probably going to happen, yeah, it's just not quite accelerating enough. So we're just going to add a little bit more acceleration there. Let's see if that's helped. So that's looking a little bit smoother now, and our walk's really taking shape. And next up would just be some follow through movement on the moustache. So I'm just going to do that in the same way that I did the hands. So I'm going to click on the moustache and start bouncing it up and down a little bit as a straight ahead animation pass. The moustache is responding to his up and down, his Y motion. So what I tend to do is pick a spot on the screen, that I can use as a reference point. So I'm going to pick this corner of his hat here, which is just out of the screen as I have it positioned here. I can see that that corner of his hat has moved down into screen, which means that I want to move the moustache a tiny bit up. And then it's moved down again, so I'm going to move the moustache up even more. And then it's starting to move back up now. So I'm going to move the moustache a tiny bit up. And now it's really moving up, so the moustache is going to start coming and bouncing down. And then as he starts to reach the top, the moustache is going to ping back up, and then eventually it will start moving down again. So that's how you do the straight ahead pass on something like a moustache. So now he's moving up. So basically, if he moves up, the moustache moves down, and if he moves down, the moustache moves up. So there we've got a tiny bit of moustache movement. And I'm just going to do the same for the other part of the moustache, and then that's pretty much our walk cycle sorted. So I've just realised whilst I was looking at the final cycle there, having finished the moustache, that actually we've got a little bit of bouncing up and down in the ankles here, so in the bottoms of the trousers. So you can actually see that the trousers have got a fair bit of play on them where I've locked the feet in place. So the feet are solid, but the trousers are moving about a bit. And there's an easy way to fix that. So I'm going to click on my foot B to start with, and I'm going to click up here to select the entire column, and note that I'm actually in the red column here, not just in the yellow column. So I'm in the red column for foot B, and I'm going to press U. So what that does is it unattaches this foot from the hierarchy, so you can see a question mark here. And now that means that I can click on this limber controller, and I can actually start to make adjustments here. So let's find a frame where there's a problem. So here you can see that the trousers are moving back on the foot on their own. And now I can use my Control, Shift and arrow keys on this limber point, and because I've detached the foot, I can do that. So if I actually go to my Move tool, I can do that without the foot moving. So I can adjust the trousers completely separate to the foot. So I'm going to go through and do that now, both feet, and that will be my final finishing pass on this walk cycle. So I've just quickly switched into time lapse here, but you can see me just using Control and the arrow keys to make small adjustments there to the ankle where it meets the foot, and that's all I'm doing. Here I'm just doing a final little adjustment to one of the feet, just making sure that everything's working solidly, and here's like a little bit of last adjustment to one of the legs. So this is what we have after a final little pass on that ankle problem that I had. What I'm going to do now is just copy and paste this so that we can see a number of these cycles actually progressing across the screen. So to copy and paste this across the screen, we're going to use the animation clipboard. So to do that, select your entire cycle, and then we're going to go Automate, Custom Animation Clipboard, Copy, and then it will give you the character that you have currently selected, so my magician in this case, and I'm going to press All, and All is going to select all of the elements there because I want to copy the information from all of those elements. I'm going to press Copy. So now we have our animation copied. I'm going to click on the last frame here. I'm going to choose Automate, Custom Animation Clipboard, Paste. And what I want to do here is paste the information, but I want to paste it so that it takes this frame and it progresses him across each time, rather than just pasting the same step from here to here every single time. And to do that, all I need to do is click this Keep Existing Values box. So if I clicked Paste Over Existing Values, and I'll do that, and I'll press Paste, see, he pops back because it's pasting exactly this animation again. So he walks over here, and then he pops back to his original place, and he'll walk again. So there, it's just pasted the exact animation. So I'm going to delete that. So what I want to do is paste using Keep Existing Values. So Automate, Custom Animation Clipboard, Paste. And then I'm going to select Keep Existing Values instead. And what that does is it takes this position here and it applies all of the movement that you have here to this position as the start point. So it means that all of the movement will be applied to here and he'll progress to the next place. So I'm using Keep Existing Values. So I press Paste and you can see that now he's progressing across the screen. So I'm going to do that a couple more times. Automate, Custom Animation Clipboard, Paste, Keep Existing Values. So there's our walk cycle progressing across the screen. That's all the tools really that you need to create a nice functional walk cycle in CelAction. And one thing I will say is, although this particular walk, it's quite a functional walk, it's quite a sort of stock walk, there's nothing particularly exciting about it. It's important with walks to get the structure of the movements down with those key poses that we began with. And once you've learned those key poses, then you can go crazy and you can start changing those poses and experimenting with ups and downs and with different patterns of the legs. But it is really important to understand the basics of a functional kind of normal walk before you progress to that stuff. This same structure will allow you to create a completely insane, crazy walk if you wanted to. So one last thing, as I was saying before, some people like to create a walk that's kind of on a conveyor belt. And to create that from this walk, it's very, very easy. All we have to do, I'm just going to move my camera across. So I've clicked on my camera and I'm using my move tool, and I'm going to move it so the crosshair is above my character there. So my character is now in the center of the screen. All I want to do now is I'm going to go into the pants level. So I've clicked on the pants there, and I'm going to the red column, and I'm going to the X movement in the red column, and I'm going to click on the top of the red column there so that it selects all the frames, and I'm going to press delete. So that has deleted all the X movement there from those frames, and now if we play it, what we've got is a nice smooth conveyor belt style walk for things like pans or a moving background scene, for example. So that's the best way to create a conveyor belt walk. It's actually doing it from a walk where he's moving forward. So that's it. That should be all the tools that you need to create a walk in CelAction, either a conveyor belt style one or a moving forward one.